Yo, yo, yo. Yo, what up? We back at it. Back to work. We had study hall this week. We had an interview for Barry on deck this week. A bunch of people hopped in and I talked about Quidditch. I think I changed some hearts. Most importantly, about the weird sport that I play on the weekends. I had a big emotional scare. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. I had a big scare. The rumor around town for a second there was that the Cowboys were gonna sign Bobby Wagner, which would naturally have broken me mentally and physically, because Bobby is my favorite player, and if there's one team in the NFL that I hate the absolute most, it is the Dallas Cowboys. But luckily we avoided that. So far, apparently Bobby's too bougie for the Cowboys. Apparently they can't afford greatness. They can't afford a legendary football player. But hey, what do I know? Anyway, we got to do social media stuff and then we'll get the show started. I got to hurry up and do this because Colin Cowherd, Twitter is pretty toxic. I'm just too old to give a shit. To you young future rock stars, there's no normal. Lean into you. Yeah, shut the fuck up, Colin Cowherd. By the way, if you haven't heard, Zion Williamson at Pelicans practice. Oh, damn. That's funny. Raiders OC, Mike Lombardi. I grew up a Raider. Okay, interesting. We do need to do some things here. By the way, shout out to YouTube removing my fucking strikes, my copyright strikes, instantly because they knew they were bullshit. Anyway, let's put a little music mix real quick. I actually need to go grab a Coke for. I need to go grab a soda real quick for the hydration break. I will be right back, and then we'll get the show started as soon as I get to OBS. Shout out to anybody who hops into the chat real quick. About to get it popping off here as soon as I get everything that I need to monitor the stream up, which is seemingly every website under the sun now, but it's really only two. Me, switch to my other account. Like and subscribe, bitch. Ooh. Chandler Jones free agent? Must be. Gotta be. Dun, 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 dun. Wow, it didn't even fucking correct it. Oh, man. I feel so bougie. I feel so ghetto. Looks like Joel Blank is live on ESPN 97.5 talking to Inflatable B. Tough times. I guess that's better than me just talking into a camera to nobody for the most part. Let's be for real. Yo. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Like I said, I'm gonna go get, I need to go get a soda real quick. Oh, we got 51 followers. We were at 50 initially. Now we're at 51. Shout out to everybody. Feel free, write questions in the chat. Drop your hot takes. Personally, I will read them aloud on the show as we go through it. We do have nerd news. We have 2 hydration breaks throughout the course of the show. So if you are a person that likes to hydrate, we actually don't judge the manner in which you choose to hydrate here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. So you do you, baby. And I'll be right back because I got to go get my hydration stuff ready. out the way. What up? We back. Time to turn up. Shout out to Christina Gukas for making an absolute banger. Jamming it out right now. Time to do science. When I say science, I mean, of course, the show. Let's get it poppin'. Oh, also. Oh, shit. That was the wrong one. You know how we do. We gotta get this social media stuff out the way right now. Remember we used to be able to like live stream on Periscope? Broke Boy Sports Podcast. Man, I gotta find like a NFL, NBA. We talk about the W today. We didn't talk about the W 2 weeks in a row. I feel like we out here killing it. You know what I mean? We out here really doing our thing, because we should be, you know, reporting on all the sports that we enjoy watching. Because I enjoy watching the W. Not gonna lie, it's gonna be a little tough watching the Aces this year. I'm kidding. Aces fucking loaded up, trying to super team this championship real quick. Set up a dynasty is what we're going for here. You know what I mean? Got to get that new jersey. I got to get an Asia Wilson jersey now, especially since Liz isn't on the team anymore, bro. Yeah. Or really, what I should get, Chelsea Gray. But an Asia Wilson, you know, maybe some of her greatness will rub off on me as an athlete. Maybe I'll get lucky and that'll happen for me. I need as much help as I can get. MLB. We got MLB. What else we got? We got podcasts. This one I like a lot. It leads into what other sport do we talk about today? Oh, we talk about UFC. We talk about the UFC. What else? We talk about the NBA. I feel like I'm missing something. Anyway, we'll figure it out. Control A. Oops, sorry. That's me hitting the copy. By the way, you're not really a person who spends too much time on the internet until you frantically copy and paste, like you're tweaking when you copy and paste things. Also, you're not really an Ashton or a fan of the show if you think we're ever gonna start on time. We're gonna cook it up real quick. Facebook.com. Sorry, you gotta get the old people in here, right? So post. Let's see. What did Lauren post? That's the wrong Lauren. Oh, it's a puppy. Everybody loves that. Oh. Alright, we out. Let's get it popping. It's time. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. Oh yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Do not need the One Piece tab that I have open right now. That's for later. Actually, won't be watching One Piece for the next 4 days, so that's gonna hurt my heart a little bit. But you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna fill my heart with hot sports takes. Here we go. Let me double check this audio level. Sounds like super low. I don't know why that would be coming through. Hello? Yeah. That's super low, bro. Hold on. I think it's because of the fucking settings, right? Yeah, it's low. Anyway, let's pause it. Get it popping. Going live in 3, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, my name is Ashton Gene Lewis. You're listening to the one, the only Broke Boy Sports Podcast. Many have tried to imitate it. And when I say many, I mean that one podcast that lasted for what looks to be 4 months, called the Broke Boy Podcast, which I think it was just two guys who were friends that wanted to start a podcast. But we eliminated that competition just like we'll eliminate all other competition as we trudge our way to the top of the podcasting world, and we sign that sweet $100 million contract and then immediately stop doing this show. So, with that being said, we had quite a week. If you've not been paying attention, on Tuesdays, I've been doing this thing called Study Hall, where I just get on the stream and and I basically just do research for the podcast and look up like current events and react to it and stuff like that. Not like intentionally with the intent of entertaining people, but it's research for the show. So I have a lot of fun doing that. And then the following day, I went on Barry on Deck, which shout out to Barry Laminack, former ESPN 97.5 co-worker of mine when we all used to work there. And now proprietor, owner, leader of the Deckheads for Barry on Deck. He was gracious enough to have me on his podcast to talk about Quidditch, ironically enough. Not necessarily this podcast in particular, but he did give me an opportunity to plug this podcast that led to a lot of people being pretty impressed with the fact that I speak English kind of well. So that happened. And then 7-8 people followed me. So I would like to take a second here and give a shout out to all the people who followed. Let me start from, wow, that's actually a while. So first of all, by the way, 3 weeks in a row, we've gained 1 follower, and we've had somebody from another country hop into the stream and talk sports with us. So it's pretty dope. Shout out to, first of all, the originator, the tin of sausage and beans, who hopped in when we were on Tuesday for a little bit. Shout out to him or them, whoever they are, that's out in England that watches the show pretty consistently. Really appreciate them. We had Aussie GG33, who apparently is a person in Peru, Lima, Peru, who aspires to play football, actually plays like American football, and their goal is to apparently, like they told us in the chat, to go to an NFL football game. Hopefully they achieve it and get a chance to see it. I know it's a lot of fun. I've been to a couple of Houston Texans games and I went to an Indianapolis Colts game when they played the Houston Texans in Indianapolis, and I think I've been to an Eagles game too. I just maybe forgot about it. Anyway, shout out to Fidel Limon, Chris _Reyes, Mr. One. Shout out to Alan Denson. Shout out to Jarrett Taylor, 2020. Shout out to Dave T23. Shout out to F Jimenez 504. And then, of course, shout out to the leader himself, Barry on Deck. We are now at 51 followers on Twitch, which is actually past a milestone that I needed to reach for to go on to the next phase. Go on to the next phase of the Twitch game. Apparently, I think it's like partner or something like that. Honestly, it's not something that I've intentionally been trying to do. It's something that very much so, with the growth of your channel, becomes a thing. Anyway, we're at 51 followers so far on Twitch. We're at 19 subscribers on YouTube. So shout out to anybody who's out there following us on YouTube, Broke Boy Sports. Check it out there. Subscribe. We're at 19. Would love to get to 20. Would love to keep increasing. Would like to say, for a person who only has 19 subscribers, I have multiple videos that have over 100 views, and I call that a win. Somehow I'm reaching people in some way, shape, or form. So appreciate that, and everybody who's come on the podcast, because if it wasn't for the previous people who've come on the show, there would never be something beneficial. This show wouldn't be what it is. Anyway, we got some other stuff to talk about. We got nerd news. We got hydration breaks. We got 2 hydration breaks, or maybe we just go with 1. We'll find. Oh, appreciate it, man. Yeah, we just gave you a shout out, F Jimenez out there, 504, hopping into the chat for the first time. Appreciate you, man, no doubt. And I had a great time talking to Barry, because when I was at ESPN 97.5, he worked basically different hours than I did, but he was always very, very nice to me when we both worked together. And he's been a big supporter of me since I went into the whole podcasting on my own thing, because at first I was kind of put into a box and I had to report only about high school sports. And I will say, my previous podcast, the 4-Ben Playbook, used to average like 200 plus listeners a day, and that was before we like started distributing to like Spotify, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff like that. People used to go out of their way to listen to the show. But shout out to F Jimenez for hopping into the chat. That makes it like 4 straight weeks of new chatters. Many would say We blowing up around here. Anyway, it's time to get to it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the show popping off, because as usual, your boy is behind schedule, and so we're going to do this. Let's go into nerd news. If you're not familiar, I'm a big geek. I really should rename this segment Geek News, but for some reason I put nerd because sometimes it is scientific stuff, sometimes it's esports stuff, but for the most part, it's like a mix, an amalgamation of things or whatever. But here is something that I actually, for the first time, pretty negative in the nerd news segment. This is reinventing yourself, centered around a new movie that has been pinned to come out that will feature Will Forte and John Cena. Now, hold on. Let's go on a little journey here. We all are very familiar with Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and their everlasting rivalry. Literally the greatest beef in the history of cartoons, right? There is no beef that's probably greater than the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, probably even stronger than what goes on with the Crips and the Bloods, and there's actual dead bodies connected to that beef. But many could say it's not really a rivalry until Wile E. Coyote actually gets the Roadrunner at some point, but I feel like once the Coyote gets the Roadrunner one time, it may be a wrap, as opposed to what the Roadrunner does. He continue. Let's be for real. The Roadrunner's just out here fucking around with Wile E. Coyote, right? Like, he's just playing with him. He doesn't kill him, but that's how god level the Roadrunner is in terms of his control of the cartoon world. He never kills the Coyote. He wants him to keep coming back. Must be those TV checks. Anyway, the Looney Tunes as a whole, as a franchise, really as an IP, as they like to call it in the biz, and what is it, information property or whatever, imagination property. Anyway, as IP, have reinvented themselves time and time again, and actually probably are the masters of it when it's all said and done, because there's not been a generation of people on this planet since the Looney Tunes came into existence that hasn't had their own specific version of the Looney Tunes that they're attached to. And some people even watch the old Looney Tune cartoons from like the 60s, right? And of course that includes the whole gang of characters: Yosemite Sam, Wile E. Coyote, Bugs Bunny, the gang from we all saw what happened with Space Jam 2. A series of adults went to a children's movie expecting to be entertained by a children's movie and were mad when they were not exactly catered to in that children's movie. So shout out to all the adults who did that on purpose. It was very weird of you. But nonetheless, this is another example of the Looney Tunes reinventing themselves in what I think is going to be a certified dud of a movie. So this is we'll go through the plot. You tell me if it's a good idea. So this is the plot of the new Coyote versus Acme live action hybrid movie. So when they say hybrid, it's the same vein as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where like there are real people walking around and then there's like cartoon characters that get edited in for different scenes later on and all that kind of jazz like that. Same concept as Space Jam. There's humans and cartoons on screen at the same time. Probably going to be CG, like based off of this screen grab right here. It's going to be CGI as opposed to the two-dimensional cartoons that you're accustomed to seeing for the most part. Very similar to what was in Space Jam 2, I'm assuming. So, the plot of this movie is Wile E. Coyote's finally fed up with the Acme products that he's been getting that have been absolute duds for, I would say, a century now, probably a century now. And so he is going to sue the Acme company. And his lawyer is a failed lawyer from like a big time firm, Will Forte. If you're familiar with like Last Man on Earth, which I thought was a really funny comedy, got canceled, I think, like season 3 or something like that. Will Forte's been in a ton of stuff. He's actually been, strangely enough, Will Forte is so resilient. He's been in so many shows that have been canceled after one season. It's ridiculous. He's very funny. I think he's got a funny face, and he does a really good job of utilizing the fact that people think his face is funny. But the premise is that Will Forte is representing Wile E. Coyote against the Acme company who he is suing, and the Acme company is represented by Will Forte's old boss, John Cena, who is the head of this other law firm or whatever that is representing the Acme company in court. That's the premise that I was given from the description that I read. You tell me if that sounds like something that even children will enjoy, especially if you're not a child that is familiar with Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, because you have to know that like all the Acme products fail or the Roadrunner outsmarts the Wile E. Coyote. like on multiple occasions. You have to understand that to be able to get down with what the show is about, right? So you have to wonder, like, have Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner actually stuck with this current generation to the point where you feel okay basing a movie around the general premise of everything that he buys from the Acme company is basically faulty or gets flipped on him by the Roadrunner, because sometimes it's not just faulty equipment. Anyway, I thought that was a strange movie. I wouldn't even say interesting, because interesting means that, like, it actually piqued my interest. I just think that sounds like a terrible movie. You tell me what you think in the comments or in the chat, and I guess we'll discuss what I think is potentially setting up to be a terrible movie. Anyway, somebody's gonna get paid off of it. Will Forte has made a lot of money off of bad movies and stuff that have come into existence. Not to say that he's a bad actor, not to say that he signs up for that kind of stuff, but facts are facts, man. He's been associated with a lot of seemingly dud level type stuff and not gotten away with it, but you know what I mean. It's been a thing. Anyway, shout out to Geek Tyrant for writing that story. I appreciate it. We move on to a segment that is a part of the selling point of this show. This show is described as the best and the worst that sports has to offer on a regular basis, right? Every single week I tell you the best and the worst thing that I saw in sports. Right now, the segment coming up is called Best of the Best. After that, we will do Worst of the Worst. But before that, in between Best of the Best and Worst of the Worst, there will be a hydration break, which will last for the length of one song that I picked by Christina Gukas, who has provided all the music for this show. Make sure you go follow her on SoundCloud. Christina, regular name spelling of Christina, and then Guckes on SoundCloud. She makes some fire-ass beats. Any music you hear on here is made by Christina by hand. She slaves over a hot beats machine and makes it happen. Anyway, we move on to Best of the Best, ladies and gentlemen. This one's for the big boys. If you did not see the NFL Combine this past week, I totally understand. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not everybody's jam. I love the NFL Combine personally just because I think until the day that I die will be an aspiring athlete. I would never call what I do in any way, shape, or form athletic, but I try to be. And Jordan Davis is the guy who doesn't try, he just does it. At 6'6" and 340 pounds, he put on the greatest NFL Combine performance literally ever. In pretty much every metric, there's a company, not a company, there's a guy on Twitter who does this thing called a RAS metric, which is where you measure the athleticism of a person relative to not only their position, but also to their size. And Jordan Davis is number one in pretty much every single fucking category, even in speed. As you can see there, his 40-yard dash is a 4.7. His vertical jump was 32 inches. If you are wondering, like a point guard in the NBA jumps like 40 inches on average, right? So he's not like too far off from that. And the 32 inches doesn't include his height. He literally is jumping. His feet are going 32 inches off the ground off of a normal jump based off of his reach. Anyway, he also broad jumped 10 feet. So if you are unfamiliar with that, he jumped the length of the ground to the rim of a basketball hoop. If you've ever played like pickup basketball or just looked at a basketball hoop before, a rim is 10 feet off the ground in a regulation size gym in pretty much any situation. That's how far he can go from standing to jumping that distance. So pretty insane overall. And it's safe to say Jordan Davis can pull off some pretty sick dunks at 6'6" with a massive vertical and a broad jump. I just wanted to take this time to remind a ton of people out there in the world that think that lean muscle, bulging biceps, shredded abs is a determinant of athleticism, and that's not even close to true. Athleticism has to deal with actually doing athletic feats. There's a lot of people who look the part but are not actually, and Jordan Davis doesn't quote unquote look the part, even though he's like swole as shit. He doesn't look the part, but he definitely walks the walk and talks the talk when it comes to being what we call an elite level athlete. So I had to take a moment and shout out all the big dudes out there, because there's a lot of people, they may not necessarily be the Jordan Davis of the world where they're just ridiculously way above and beyond everybody else that's around them, but nonetheless there are a lot of big dudes out there who can enjoy cheeseburgers and go out there and turn it up on any type of athletic field. And I think if you're a real athlete, you recognize that. So that's all I have for Best of the Best. Shout out to Jordan Davis for holding it down for all the big dogs. Appreciate that. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we will take our first hydration break of the show. And looks like we're going to play my favorite song, Humble Beliefs, because it honestly is a bop that that Christina made. We're going to play Humble Beliefs. We'll be back in 3 minutes and 8 seconds, and we'll continue the show with Worst of the Worst, which is the worst thing that I saw in sports right here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. And we're back here live on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. Shout out to everybody who has joined us either on Twitch or on YouTube, because you can find us the exact same way. You type in Broke Boy Sports on both of those platforms, and magically, my face becomes a regular part of your week. So shout out to you for joining us right here. Smart decision, especially on a Friday. I'm trying to power through. We're trying to get a bunch of information. In at one time. It's not like a Tuesday where I'm just kind of, tooling around the internet, wasting people's time and stuff like that. Actually, not wasting people's time. I spend more time interacting with the crowd and the audience and stuff like that on Tuesdays when we do study sessions. But shout out to everybody who hopped into the chat. And like I said before, thank you to Barry Laminack, who allowed me on this podcast. And I got 7 new followers in the course of that, which pushed me over the 50 followers that I've been trying to get to reach a new milestone for my Twitch journey, if you will. And for the people who are out there watching right now, or in the distant future, or in just like the recent, like near future, like tomorrow or like an hour after the show stops going live, it's time to do worst of the worst thing that I saw in sports this week. Here we go. Yeah, it's time to talk about the Gulag. Some of you who are Warzone fans will be very familiar with this terminology. I find it hilarious because I'm pretty sure there's a whole collection of people that don't know the Gulag is an actual thing, and that's why it's referenced in Warzone. The Gulag is, of course, in reference to basically the brig, but Russian style, if you are familiar with that kind of thing. And currently, right now, there's one of many American citizens that's in the Gulag. Her name is Brittany Griner. She's a Houston native. She is the #1 center in the world in terms of women's basketball. She plays professional basketball in not only the WNBA, but like pretty much every WNBA player that you see. She plays year round to be able to get that money, especially considering in Russia she makes $1.5 million. She has been detained in Russia for her whatever indefinite amount of time. So far, what we know about it is she had some hashish oil or hash oil, and she was detained just like any other person would be in America for drug possession. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have come up with their own theories. There's a lot of people who have pointed out how the Russians in years past have done immense amount of illegal things to detain American citizens and all that kind of jazz like that. And it just so happens to happen, right around the time where Russia is in the midst of a war where they're trying to ward off the rest of the global powers to prevent them from taking over all of Ukraine. So that's interesting how all of a sudden, which by the way, I fervently believe, and maybe you can, if you're in the tweets or you're in the comment section or whatever, you can tell me, do you think that this is the first time that Brittany Griner was carrying hash oil around? Because I don't. I believe that Brittany Griner is a person that partakes in marijuana, in hash oil and stuff like that on a regular basis for dabs and all that kind of stuff like that. And first of all, I don't have a problem with that. It's not something that I have personally ever had an interest in, but I support anybody who does it, especially once again, you're doing something that's not hurting anybody else. It's only going in your own body. But I'm pretty sure she's done this before, so it's like it feels like one of those situations where they just pulled her aside right now, knowing that information that she's done it before, which is understandable, not understandable at all, but which is something that I'm not surprised. Like they do that here in America. They pick and choose when they enforce laws, right? Like I said before, do we really believe this is the first time that Brittany Griner has been in this situation, or not, who has carried hash oil and they've just kind of like let her go by or whatever? And then it's really strange to me because we know for a fact that like Russia is just like pretty much every other country, whether they be one of the Power 5 countries in the world or whatever, or they be one of the general companies in the whether they be one of the just regular countries in the world. Like your fame and money can get you past and get you around and exempt from some of the rules. And then Brittany Griner, they have to know that she has like deep connections with people who have money because she's famous in Russia because of her basketball skill. Combine that with the fact that like I'm sure they know for a fact that Brittany Griner plays for a team that is owned by a Russian billionaire, Askov Madov, out there. Like legitimately, it looks like it's Iskander Makhduf. I think that's my second strike at it, so I'll take that one. And her fame in the U.S., a country that Russia is concerned about. Like Russia is very concerned about what America is okay and not okay with happening, especially considering there's kind of like veiled threats going around about America not interfering with the Ukrainian economy and stuff like that to help them in this time of need as they are under attack. So it's just really weird that you do all of this right now, because it kind of comes off like it's a threat. It comes off like it's a threat to potentially never release Brittany Griner, or potentially to do further harm. Shout out to the first time chatter, the Riddler. I ain't gonna be broke no mo. You must be a part of our scheme here. If you don't know, the whole scheme behind the Broke Boy Sports Podcast is to make this podcast so popular via likes and follows, to the point where we sign a $100 million contract, and as soon as we sign that contract, we never do this show again. That's how we never gonna be broke again. Like Tyrese in Too Fast, Too Furious, where he said, "We ain't hungry no more," and then he lifted his shirt up because he had all the dollar bills. Yeah, that one. That's the life we trying to live right now. Uncle Sam's got to get his money, but I'm gonna keep most of it. But yeah, her detainment, like as a whole, comes off like it's a threat. like a very thinly, not even thinly veiled threat. They actually like released a booking photo of her and everything like that. It comes off like a blatant threat. So I call that worst of the worst because one, it's a black woman who, it's a black queer woman in a anti-LGBT country like Russia, and then on top of that, just like being in Russia, I would also like to point out if you've heard money is a bad motivator, son. There, you just learned something. Thanks for the free advice, the Riddler. Appreciate that. Thank you for dropping some knowledge on the people in the chat. Anyway, first of all, I disagree. Money is a great motivator, especially if it gets you. Money gets you further and further away from having to do stuff that everybody else has to do. Shout out to the Riddler though. Hopefully they followed. Hopefully they like and followed the stream. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, right. We're talking about the detainment of an American citizen in a country that we've been groomed as Americans to kind of hate, like a lot. Anyway, she's a black woman being detained in a country that is currently in the midst of a very publicized war that's basically happening in 4K, right? A streamed war. Nobody ever said that that has money didn't get there by the motivation of money. Huh. No, everybody that has money didn't get there by the motivation of money. That is an interesting theory on how some people got money. You're right, because some people were born rich and just stayed rich. That's their greatest achievement in life. They were born rich and didn't lose all the money, which, hey, when you got the lead and you don't blow it, you're still a winner at the end of the day, right? No matter if the person who, if you're the 16 seed that had to upset the number 1 seed, or you're the 5 seed that went out there and they beat the 12 seed in the first round. A win is a win, right? But yeah, that's all I got for worst of the worst, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move on here for a second. We're going to do a segment I called About a Week Ago, which is basically like a referendum on how vicious the 24-hour news cycle is and how quickly things in the world that we live in change. So it's a story that happened last week, and then we talk about how it's changed this week. I think this one's pretty obvious. If you're familiar with the show, if you've been here before, you know what the story in this segment is. But we'll dive into it and talk about it. About a week ago, baseball was dead. Baseball was in the midst of its longest lockout second longest lockout in Major League Baseball history. It was on the verge of thousands of minor league players not being able to pay their bills, not being able to get money, not being able to, continue to chase the dream. And then this week, baseball's back. Baseball is back like it never left, baby. There's a couple of, there's been a collective bargaining agreement signed. Tony Clark and the Players Association finally got some concessions from the owners after they basically tried to manhandle them vast majority of this negotiation. But then the pressure of not only missing games, which by the way affected the players for sure, but also was going to be in the midst of affecting the regional TV contracts that that the team owners we're in possession of. If you're not familiar with this concept, the regional contract, if you're in Houston, you get Houston Astros games because of a regional TV contract at all times, right? Like every Houston Astros game you can watch on a different channel that's not ESPN or anything like that. A lot of you watch it on Root Sports, which is the company that I used to work for back when it was Fox Sports transitioning into Root Sports because it was owned by Disney, and Disney did the merger with Fox and all that kind of jazz like that. But there's also that aspect of what were we talking about? Oh, AT&T Sportsnet, which is the company that owns the Rockets, right? The Rockets and all that kind of jazz like that. So we have that going on. The regional sports contracts have a thing where they have to get up to a certain amount of games, and then if they don't reach the required number of games to be displayed or be aired, the money has to go back to the TV contract, or goes back to the regional TV stations that paid the money to the Major League Baseball team for the rights to air their games. So the owners had some skin in the game to a certain degree, and they were getting kind of close to that territory, especially with the first 2 series for every team in Major League Baseball getting canceled immediately. Which, by the way, like we all suspected, when they told us that they were not going to reschedule or figure out a way for those games to be added back onto the season, guess what they did, guys? Oh man, they really put their brains together. They rubbed those brain cells together, and all of a sudden we're good again. All of a sudden, Major League Baseball has found a way to go out there and get this money with the TV contracts by finding a way to work around the time that they missed. Who would have thought? Other stuff that's happening, opening day moves to April 7th. Pretty much every all the teams are at training. All the teams are at spring training. There are not going to be any spring training games. They're going to go hop right into the season, which actually could bode well because, as we all know, some athletes start the season off hot, and then by the time the playoffs roll around, they've lost all their juice because of the effort that it takes to be consistently great within the realm of baseball, right? 162-game schedule will be played. The biggest change is the 2 additional playoff teams that are going to be had. So there's going to be 12 out of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball that will make the playoffs, almost half, which is a drastic increase from just a couple of years ago, the last collective bargaining agreement. That means that there are more markets who have a chance to actually win a title, right? More playoff teams increases the number of lottery tickets for people to be able to play well for like a month of baseball and end up in the World Series. That's massive for baseball, as it's a sport that, like we've talked about before, they struggle with maintaining an audience that is of the new generation. So having more teams that have more skin in the game is going to go a long way in terms of getting people's attention. I've always been a big proponent, and this is actually like a defining feature of a lot of different sports fans, and I always am interested to hear people's assessments of it, right? So if you have the chance to mold the way that a sports league, if you take the NBA, the NFL, the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, even in the UFC, right? NHL hockey, right? And you get to pick who wins the championship every year. Would you pick the same team 7 years in a row? Or would you pick 7 different teams? Or would you pick 4 different teams and 3 teams and have the four different teams, and one of those 4 teams wins 3 championships in a row, and the rest get 1? Or one of those teams wins 4 championships in a row, and the rest get 3. Right? They get 1 each. It's a concept. It's an interesting concept because it questions whether or not you believe dynasties or quote-unquote parity is important in terms of how people pay attention to sports, right? Is there being a target that everybody can collectively root against the best way to get people to pay attention to your sport? Like, for instance, you talk about the New England Patriots. Everybody collectively, if you were an NFL fan or if you were even like a loosely attached football fan, and there's one thing about humans. If you give them one enemy, which, by the way, a lot of people argue is how Adolf Hitler got what he got in terms of power and his ability to manipulate people. He created a collective enemy, the Jewish people, and turned everybody against him. And so everybody felt like they were on the right because every other person except that small group of people was against that group of people, right? That's the same thing, right? It's the same thing as like the Patriots go out there and win the championships. Everybody hates every Patriots fan and the Patriots. And everybody feels like they're in the right because every other fan base hates the Patriots, right? There are more people who hate the Patriots than like them. And then the Patriots fans, they get real defensive, they get real aggressive because they're the enemy number one. They've got the target on their back, and it creates that strife and that rub against it or whatever. Or would you like it if there were 7 different teams who won the first 7 championships, meaning that it creates the possibility in every fan's mind that anybody can win any given year? Is that more valuable than having a collective target that everybody's shooting at? Is that more valuable than having an Alabama to take aim at? Is that more valuable than having a Duke to take aim at as a franchise? I don't know. You tell me. I believe that 7 different champions would get you better results than having a powerhouse of a team. But yeah, more markets are going to be engaged because there'll be more playoff teams, right? What is that? That's 12 different teams, so that's 6 different playoff matchups throughout the course of in the first round of the playoffs, right? Under the new CBA, the minimum salary for Major League Baseball players is now $700,000, and it is supposed to increase incrementally to, I think it increases by almost a fourth to $780,000 by the year 2026, which is huge because that means that those players who are going to end up in arbitration and have to deal with time manipulation from the owners, which of course is going to be a universal problem because it's going to be the one thing that they will never budge on, right? Those players are going to have more money in their pocket. The luxury tax ceiling has been increased by 10%, which will be great for the players because now the owners have more room to spend money on the players, which means that there's more money flowing from the owners' pockets to players' pockets if they want to win a championship, which we know for a fact in every single sport, in every single league you're in, not every team is trying to win a championship every single year, right? That's just not true. A lot of teams believe in building through the draft, and they recognize that there are going to be years that they have to play badly, they have to play poorly, or suffer through the fact that they don't have a good enough roster to be a championship roster. Only stupid fans at this point don't believe that concept, that there are multiple teams that just don't deal with, there are multiple teams that just don't have the desire to win. There are plenty of teams every single year. I'm not like the Howard Bryant degree of it, where he believes there's only like 3 or 4 teams that are actually trying to win in every single league every single year. I'm more of a like 50-50 kind of guy. But yeah, and I think there's a group of teams that know that they have a talented roster, but don't think it's enough to win a championship. But when they see that they have a shot at it, they go for it. And I think there's a lot of there's also teams that are in the same situation, that they see they have an opportunity, but they don't go for it. They wait, and they're like, well, next year it'll be even better, and we don't have to spend all this money. We don't have to go all in utilizing draft picks, whatever it may be. The second longest lockout in Major League Baseball history is officially over, and that's what about a week ago was about this week. So shout out to everybody who made that happen. Shout out to Tony Clark and absolutely nobody else. So we move on to another segment called We Talking Money or We Talking Money, which, you guessed it, is about money. Today's number is billions. Calvin Ridley, this is actually a wild ass story outside of the fact that Calvin Ridley is now suspended for an entire NFL season. So we're actually going to talk about some stuff. I had to write all this down because I actually dove way too deep into Florida politics to understand what the hell happened with the app that he actually bet on. Somebody, so I think I told you guys this if you've listened to the show before. I've been roped into like multiple fantasy football leagues throughout the course of the years. One of them was from a Quidditch player in Florida, and he had a bunch of friends who don't play Quidditch who wanted to be in a fantasy football league. I think I absolutely stunk up the joint when I joined this league, but he wanted me to be in there because he's like, oh, Ashton's a sports guy, which, by the way, I can't tell you how many times that fucking happens, right? Calvin Ridley, if you didn't hear, suspended for all of the upcoming NFL season after missing all of last year most of last year due to a mental health situation where he felt like he needed to step away from football. His contract is now officially frozen and removed from the salary cap count of the Atlanta Falcons. We'll talk about that in a second. He used this app called the Hard Rock Sportsbook app in Florida. The app saw, I guess Calvin Ridley used his own fucking phone number or something like that, or somebody pieced together that this came from the address of Calvin Ridley. I don't know how they could have done that, but honestly, there are so many, the shady people, not the shady people, the mysterious people, the knowers, the wise guys, if you will, to use a term, not to say they're connected to the mob or anything like that, but there's the guys who know everything, right? They know too much. In a good way for some people. But they reported the app itself, the people who run the app reported Calvin Ridley. It wasn't like somebody snitched on Calvin Ridley or something like that. The people who ran the app somehow recognized that this is Calvin. Maybe they have a directory of every single NFL player's active phone number or something like that. And if they get a bet from a phone that's connected to this number or to this account or something like that, it pings them and they have to report it. They report it to a company that is in charge of compliance for the NFL. By the way, if these dudes get paid to track potential player bets, they're probably getting away with highway robbery, because there's very few players in the NFL that are actually gambling on games because they all know not to do that. And then on top of that, the NFL, because of situations like this, right? Like, they know not to do that. Like, if this is a year-long suspension for an immensely talented football player in Calvin Ridley, for a ridiculously talented guy in Calvin Ridley, who was a big part of his franchise's continued next steps. Now, if you're a third-string corner, a fourth-string corner, a guy who hasn't made his money in the league or whatever, you're not going to risk your entire career for a $1,500 bet, unless you don't care. Some people don't care. Some people care more. But once again, it's about priorities, right? But yeah, that's one of the deals that goes along with this. It's very strange how it all shook out, because I was that was my first question. I was like, who snitched on Calvin Ridley? I had to know. I was like, who went out here and told on Calvin Ridley? And apparently it was the app that did it, not a person. Allegedly. We'll see. But this gets even weirder. The compliance company reported it to the NFL. They investigated. They've now suspended him for a year. This sports book is now shut down. It's a Hard Rock, like it's the Hard Rock company, right? Like, they make the Hard Rock Cafe, they make the Hard Rock Casino, all the giant guitar. We all know they have a stadium stadium rights that they've purchased on multiple venues, right, across America, across the globe, really, because they own they own hotels in different countries and stuff like that. It is that company. This sports book in Florida is shut down because the Seminole tribe, who signed what they called a compact with the state of Florida to allow for this sports book to be built on their land where gambling is legal, right, within the realm of Florida, is now having a federal judge come in and say it is actually unconstitutional for people to place bets online because the only location that it is legal to place the bet is actually on the Seminole tribe's land. Wild to think about. But yeah, that's what happened. They're getting real technical with it in the sense that like the money's being sent to the Seminole Tribe sports book or whatever, but if you're not actually in the casino when you place the bet, it is now illegal. So yeah, that's the wild part of this whole thing. The app that he used to bet on is now shut down because of a strong technicality like that, and apparently it is a huge part of Florida trying to get gambling legalized in their state. So that's the weird wrinkle that goes into this whole situation. Me, honestly, opinion on this whole situation, Calvin's suspension is multiple things. It's a deterrent for future players, like I mentioned before, guys who are on the low end of the roster, guys who still haven't established themselves. Like Calvin was a first-round draft pick for a reason. He was ridiculously talented at Alabama. He has proven himself to be a deadly wide receiver with the Atlanta Falcons, and honestly, he's amazing. He looks like he's on the track to being a wide receiver of note, and he's now going to be missing 2 years in a row, so we'll see how that goes for him. I'm sure he's going to file like 1,000,000,001 appeals to try and get this overturned, and maybe once they're further away from this incident, people will be a little bit more lenient, but as of right now, he's cooked. A show of good faith for the billions on the line for bettors and the sports books investors that is good for ad revenue, so the NFL going harshly on finding out that a player who has the ability to which, by the way, we can have a discussion about how much a singular football player can manipulate an entire football game, right? It depends on what singular player it is, right? The number one player at the top of the list would have to be a quarterback, and quarterbacks get paid too well to go out there and throw games for the most part, unless there's some other things on the line, right? There are some things that are more important than money when it's all said and done. But to question like how much a defensive tackle can influence a football game on any given play, how much can a corner, how much can a safety, how much can a long snapper or a punter or a tight end, a second string tight end, can they influence an individual football game? Is a question I think is a legitimate one to ask. And if you have a response, hit me up in the comments, hit me up on Twitter afterwards at FB_playbook. Let me know what you think. How much impact can 1 of 22 have on the game? Because right now, in my mind, even in the realm of betting, right, like Las Vegas talks about this all the time, how much is an individual player worth in points? And for a lot of situations, they say that a quarterback is only worth at best, a quarterback is worth 1.5 points for the most part. And that's in the positive swing for the most part. But yeah, this is like a show of good faith for all future gambling partners and people who bet on the NFL, obviously, right? That they're going to adjudicate this to the point where you feel like it's unfair. Like they want you to feel uncomfortable with how harshly they punish gambling as opposed to the other thing. A lot of people have brought up the Ray Rice situation about how Ray Rice literally knocked his wife out on a security camera in a elevator and then dragged her unconscious body to their hotel room or whatever. And they said, wow, man, the NFL really doesn't care about women. I was like, first of all, like, when did the NFL ever give you the impression that they cared about women? So yeah, like that's a legitimate question to ask yourself. But yeah, and a lot of other people kind of did the cop-out answer of, well, the legal system didn't take care of their job. It's like, cool, so like the legal system fails people all the time. That doesn't mean that we as a society can't put pressure on people to properly adjudicate what we believe to be a crime. Like, whatever you have to say, we actually, like, if there's one case that's ever been cut and dry in the NFL, it is that, like, his fiance/wife said something to him, and he punched her, and she hit her head on a railing that could have, caused a brain bleed, done something horrible to her. Luckily for us, she was okay. She was able to wake up, survive long enough to be able to get to a Baltimore Ravens press conference to apologize for her role in an incident where they ended up with her unconscious. Don't forget that part. Anyway, yeah, like people cop out and be like, the legal system didn't take care of it. I'm like, legal system fails people all the time. Like, I think even people within the legal system will tell you that, right? So that can't be your line of demarcation in terms of like what's right and what's wrong, because like laws are not determined by what's right and what's wrong. Laws are not a moral compass. They are a way to put boundaries within society. And sometimes those boundaries are good, sometimes those boundaries are bad. We don't have enough time to get into the deep aspect of that. I would also like to point out, people were talking about how this is to protect the idea that NFL football could be linked to corruption. Boxing is still a really major sport in the world. That's all I'm going to say. If there was ever a sport that it seems sketchy as fuck at any given time, that one person can control the most of the game, like you're one judge away from somebody losing their belt. I saw an article last night released by AP Sports about how they had to remove a judge from a light heavyweight title fight in a different classification, I think IBC or something like that, and it was like a UK fighter got his belt back because they removed a judge who clearly was like on a totally different judging scale than everybody else. It was so absurd. And it's like, it's really hard for somebody who's like a boxing fan to not sit there and be like, that person clearly had some ulterior motive to go along with this, right? Like, it'd be very easy to point at that. Also, I would like to point out, the league is mad about Calvin betting, but also allows people to bet on things like the Pro Bowl. Sports books do. I honestly, like, this past year, that was my number one takeaway from the Pro Bowl. I was like, you should not be allowed to bet on this. I think that there are so many shenanigans going on in the Pro Bowl, and they're not even tackling anymore, right? They're not playing like actual football, and I get it. It's not the responsibility of the sports books to question the validity of the games and stuff like that. But if there was ever a game that has too many shenanigans to the point where you should feel uncomfortable putting money on it as a gambler, it is the Pro Bowl. It is the Pro Bowl. So that being said, that's all I got for That's all I got for We Talking Money and We Talking Money. The number is billions. It should also be millions, because Calvin Ridley is definitely costing himself millions of dollars, missing this entire season. He has been removed from the salary cap number for the Atlanta Falcons. Like I said before, he's also his contract is essentially frozen. So when he comes back, it'll be like the 2023. It'll be like the 2022 year of his contract. So he will still be an Atlanta Falcon. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I think we got media suggestions, and then we're taking our final hydration break, and then we're going to power through some stuff in sports real quick. So for media suggestions this week, hopefully it's muted. We'll find out here in a second. Media suggestions this week, this is a real simple one. The Shop is back. If you were a fan of The Shop before, the first full episode of The Shop is on the Uninterrupted YouTube channel. Uninterrupted is, of course, the company that the media company that LeBron James has started up to talk about I'm more than an athlete, all that kind of stuff like that. You should definitely check it out. They had Lamar Jackson. They had Quinta Scott? Sorry, from Abbott Elementary, creator and star of Abbott Elementary. They had Donald Glover and Jay Blavin on there, and they had a real good conversation about creativity, the feeling of dominance. LeBron James talked about his excitement that he still has about playing basketball and all that kind of jazz like that. It's a podcast that's on HBO with like a ton of famous people. I don't even think they pretended to cut people's hair in this episode like they normally do. It's Quentin Brunson, I'm sorry. Also, check out Quentin's other show, Black Lady Sketch Show. Is hilarious. But yeah, this is wild. Everybody, I love how The Shop has everybody show up with like a perfectly trimmed up lineup and everything like that, and then they pretend to cut people's hair. So I find that funny at all times. I would show up my hair fucked up because I'm assuming the barber that they have in The Shop is like some celebrity barber that's there as like a human prop essentially. But yeah, I would suggest you watch it. It's a free episode of The Shop. You don't really get that too much. It's free HBO material, which means that it's really well produced and all that kind of jazz like that. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we move on. We move on to the final hydration break of the show. Once again, hydration break. We're going to be gone for a couple of minutes. I don't judge in the manner in which you choose to hydrate. So do it however you like. We are going to listen to Make Your Mark. Yeah, Make Your Mark by Christina Gukas for 2 minutes and 58 seconds. We'll be right back. I'll be sipping on this whiskey and Coke while we do that. Right here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. And we're back here to power through the back half of the show. Shout out to everybody who's joining us here in the chat, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitch, whether it be in the present right here, right now, with me, looking into my beautiful eyes, or into the distant or near future. And ladies and gentlemen, they're here. The Russian bots. I think that took, can I get a time code? That's the first one I've seen. So that's actually, I think, the deepest. I think that's the longest it's taken them to hop into the chat today. Kittle, Relander, obvious Russian bot. I think they're a little occupied. I think they're a little occupied with something going on, so they haven't been able to focus. Looks like Deshaun Watson may be, here we go. Texans QB Deshaun Watson has completed the first of 2 sessions of depositions as part of the 22 lawsuits filed against him. So yeah. This is Dan Lust, who is, by the way, if you don't follow Dan Lust on the internets, it's Sports Law Lust. He's a really good podcaster. It's called Confidential. Hold on, it's what is it? Partially Confidential? Conject Detrimental. I don't know why I say confidential. Because the Twitter account for the podcast is CON Detral. So it's Conduct Detrimental. I listen to it at least once a week. Sometimes they go on for a little too long for me, you know what I mean? But it is in my regular queue every single week. So shout out to Dan Lust, who has always been kind enough to respond to my direct messages, and hopefully one day we'll be on this podcast if we can get big enough. So shout out to everybody who's listening and watching. Follow me on Twitter at FB_playbook. Also, chop it up with me about sports on FB_playbook too. I talk about all kinds of stuff. I tweet like really late at night because that's when my brain is most active. But other than that, what's popping? This is the segment of the show where we talk about what's popping in sports, baby. If you got a topic that you want to talk about, drop it in the chat. I will be more than gracious enough to talk about it with you. And then on top of that, I got a list of shit that I got to talk about here. So tell me what you're doing this weekend. And anything else that's going on. Hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to find my Google document so we can keep it rolling. We are just over an hour. Trying to keep it under an hour and 20. Well, let's do it. We can do it. I believe in us. Actually, there we go. Sorry, trying to organize things here because we got to scoot through this one real quick. Let's start with the NFL. So, there are 2 things that are offensive lineman related. If you don't know this about me, I was a shitty college offensive lineman. I played like half a season at Valparaiso University, and then it started interfering with my ability to make it to classes on time. And then on top of that, the injuries were not the problem. Pain has never been something that's deterred me from playing sports. As a person with a rolled ankle into oblivion right now, who's gone to 2 Quidditch practices this week already, Jason Kelce, center for the Philadelphia Eagles, will return. You can put that like the Marvel thing at the end of the movies where they're like, Iron Man will return, which, spoiler alert, he will not. And is the highest paid center in NFL history as of today. He's going to sign a deal, I think, that pays him $14 million. Shout out to Jason Kelce, 4-time All-Pro. By the way, the Eagles' offensive line really has gone through a ton of changes in the last 5 years. You talk about Lane Johnson at the left tackle position, who could potentially be one of the best left tackles in the NFL any given year, but has struggles with his health. His ankle has collapsed in multiple times on him while he's been playing in the NFL, which of course is a massive indicator of how hard it is to play in the fucking NFL. Brandon Brooks is a top-tier offensive guard who has suffered from not only physical injuries but also mental injuries as well, in terms of anxiety that has prevented him from playing a couple of games. The sudden emergence, in a positive sense, changes on the offensive line for the Eagles. Jordan Mailata, who had a rugby background and had not played football up until like very recently in his life, and now is considered to be one of the best tackles in the game, or one of the best young tackles in the game. One man has remained the absolute constant for the Eagles offensive line, and that is Jason Kelce. He's a Super Bowl champ, 4-time All-Pro, and however many times Pro Bowl. As you know, on this show, we don't care about Pro Bowls. We care about All-Pro selections. This is his 12th season in the NFL. Playing offensive line, that man has seen some things. He has gone through a lot of pain to continue his career, and he is coming back for year 13. And I can't wait to see it, man. Hopefully he can be a part of something special. Look like the Eagles were looks like the Eagles are trending in the direction you would expect, especially for a team that just a couple of years ago was a Super Bowl contender. It looks like sounds like, my bad, we got a new follower, Day One Donna. Shout out to Day One Donna for hopping on the Broke Boy train here. I don't really know what to call the people who listen to the show, but shout out to Day One Donna for checking out the show. I really appreciate that. I know you're a huge part of what Barry Laminack does on a regular basis for Barry on Deck. Shout out to you. Ali Marpet, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you not familiar with this name. It's all good, baby. He's retired. You don't have to remember his name anymore. But I would like to take a moment and talk about the story of one Ali Marpet. At the age of 27 years old, he is retired from the NFL. A story that honestly should inspire like any person that plays football, because he's the example of like, you can make it from anywhere and they will find you. He was a D3 football player who became an NFL Super Bowl champion. So, he's the highest drafted Division III football player ever. He was selected in the second round pick. He was selected as a second-round pick to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He blew up at the Combine after emailing Phil Savage his tape to get an invite to the Senior Bowl, which, if you know, the Senior Bowl is a massive part of any upperclassman, any senior that's trying to make it into the NFL, especially considering the NFL tends to skew towards the younger guys, because the younger guys have more developmental period that they can mold in the NFL. So a lot of the guys who leave after 3 years are more coveted than the seniors and stuff like that, very similar to what happens in basketball. But Phil Savage has the Senior Bowl every year, and that's where you get to see some of the best that the country has produced in terms of college football. If you're wondering what college Ali Marpet went to, I'm sure you've all heard of it, Hobart College in New York. The enrollment is 2,300, like 2,351 to be exact. Yeah, so he went to a school that was not only super small, but also didn't have any media coverage or anything like that. So everything that Ali Marpet did to get to the NFL is an example of his dedication and hard work and a little bit of luck. You always got to throw a little bit of luck in there as well. But Ali Marpet, shout out to him for a absolutely legendary and short career. He played 7 years in the NFL, and all 7 of them were absolutely amazing. He also, by the way, was pegged to make like $20 million over the next 2 years, and he decided, I'm good. That's either a sign of some horrifying injuries that we don't know about yet, or a sign of a man who is truly content with what his football career is. Hopefully it is the latter of those two that I just said. The thing is over. The thing where Aaron Rodgers told us all that, the Green Bay Packers are the worst organization in all of football, and that he wanted to never be associated with them again. But he will be playing for them next year, according to, for the foreseeable future. He'll be playing for them. Turns out all they needed to do was sign Randall Cobb. That's what it seems like. It seems like the only thing they had to do was like sign Randall Cobb that one time, and now Aaron Rodgers is cool with him again. I will also point out the Green Bay Packers did like a stock share sale where they sold shares of the team, which is the wildest thing ever, because the stocks don't actually give you any power in terms of control of the team, because it prevents like a random person from being able to go around and buy people's shares of the Green Bay Packers and then all of a sudden be like, I'm the majority owner of the Packers, right? They're literally just pieces of paper to be like, you paid the Green Bay Packers $300. That's what it was. You paid the Green Bay Packers $300 and now you own part of the team, but like you have no say in what the team does. I will also point out the money that they get from the stock share is utilized only for stadium stuff, which is the stadium is publicly funded. So that's actually, reinvesting in the community, if you will, because obviously everybody has infinite access to Lambeau Field and can do whatever they want. They can have like picnics on the field and shit like that, right? But yeah, the thing is over. Aaron Rodgers apparently signed a deal. Apparently the deal is not worth 4 years, $200 million, making him the highest paid quarterback ever for like $50 million a year. Apparently there's some other deal that's happening, according to him. Watch it be like 4 years, $201 million. And I know that one is actually a whole $1 million, which is more money than like most people can spend in a lifetime. But the fact of the matter is like that 201, it looks on paper, when you type it out, it's just like it's one digit off. But like in real life, $1 million is a really big difference in terms of the amount of money somebody is getting paid. So yeah, there's that going on. Have not heard anything about how much the actual contract is worth, but apparently there's an agreement in place that he will sign with the Green Bay Packers. And if I was the Packers, I would be trying to get him to sign as soon as possible, because you know how he can be. That's all I'll say. Anyway, what else we got? Oh, trades. Trades in the NFL as the new league year starts next Wednesday on March 16th, which is the day after the Ides of March. By the way, next week's show is definitely going to be called the Ides of March, even if it's not happening on March 15th. In case you forgot it from school, the Ides of March, or the Ides of any month, is the middle of the month. March has 30 days. Therefore, the Ides of March is March 15th. Shout out Shakespeare. Shout out. Trades. Khalil Mack has been traded from the Bears to the Chargers of LA. The Chargers are expected to send a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 sixth-round pick. So, a second-round pick and then essentially nothing to the Bears in return for Khalil Mack. This is the first big move by their new general manager, which I'm assuming, and they've also are going to cut one of their nose tackles. They're also cutting Tariq Cohen due to health injuries. If you don't remember, Tariq Cohen got like really big time because he was like 5'7", but was able to, but was like faster than everybody else on the field. He was like Tyreek Hill, but a running back. And when you're a running back, but you're Tyreek Hill size and Tyreek Hill speed, when you get hit, things hurt. So he's had a knee injury for the past 2 years and hasn't been able to play. So he's actually getting cut from the Bears, and they're probably gonna, there's gonna be a mass exodus of Bears veteran players, which is understandable because if you got Justin Fields, you got to start making room for newer defensive players to come in, and then of course you got to start freeing up money to be able to get the few free agents that are going to be available to you, and also make some of these trades because they're basically, I'm 100% sure they're trying to trade every single one of these players to try and get some kind of draft capital because they want as many draft picks that they can get for the next 3 years to basically flip this entire roster. So them getting 2 draft picks for one Khalil Mack, they call that a win, especially since Khalil Mack did not finish all of last season. He's 31 years old. He'll be joining up with the Chargers, who, if you remember, were one of the worst, if not the worst, run defenses in the entirety of the NFL, and it cost him a playoff spot. Remember that? It cost them a playoff spot, so naturally what they needed to do was go out there and get one of the best pass rushers in the NFL at the time. So it also remains to be seen that past the age of 30 that Khalil Mack can be the pass rusher that he was when he was with the Oakland Raiders all those years ago, which seems like an eternity ago, but it was not. So there's that. Russell Wilson, oh man. Sorry guys, hold on. Pour one out for the homies that didn't make it. And then also drink one for Bobby Wagner. Ooh, almost knocked that one over. That would have been bad for the show. Russell Wilson was traded from the Seattle Seahawks to the Broncos for a 4th-round pick. And with a 4th-round pick, they got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, Noah Fant, and Drew Lock. And I hope the Drew Lock aspect of this trade is not what I think the Drew Lock aspect of this trade is, which is, of course, Drew Lock is now the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, because this may be the last time you catch me wearing this hoodie, if that's the case. Especially now that Bobby's gone. If you guys don't know, I've talked about it before on the show. Bobby Wagner is my favorite NFL football player. I actually have a t-shirt that's like it's a Seahawks logo with Bobby's jersey number and his name on the back of it. Was going to get a Bobby Wagner jersey this year. Luckily, I didn't, apparently. So shout out everybody who, shout out for me for not spending that money, but also Russell Wilson being traded to the Seahawks basically signifies the complete end of the Legion of Boom era, as if that had not happened before. But basically, the cutting of Bobby Wagner did that. But 2 of the franchise cornerstone players in the for the Seattle Seahawks, the guys who, if through thick and thin, you knew those guys were going to go out there and ball out of control. They're both gone. Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos, with who they have one of the best defenses in the NFL. If you notice, the people that they traded away were both on the offensive side of the ball. I would also like to point out Noah Fant would have been super useful for Russell Wilson in Seattle, but ironically enough, not the case. So Russell Wilson with the Denver Broncos, of course, that's a huge, huge implication for the AFC West, which looks like they're about to have 3 playoff teams for the foreseeable future. As I would like to point out, the Kansas City Chiefs kind of, diminishing returns on everything. That investment in Frank Clark, who's the highest paid edge rusher in the NFL right now. I have to imagine that he's also going to be cut pretty soon. that situation going on, man, the slowly diminishing of the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be interesting because a lot of people I think there's a lot of people who still view them as the team that they were 3 years ago, and that's just not the case. Russell Wilson may be ushering in the new dominance of the Denver Broncos as he is going to be a part of a team that has a somewhat decent offensive line, which has been a huge problem for most of the Seattle Seahawks time period that they have had Russell Wilson. Like, there's been very few times where Russell Wilson's had, like, the dominant offensive line that he needs to be able to be successful up front. They've had Dwayne Brown for a really long time, but then the other four guys, literally the other four guys have been a struggle. They started rookies, they've started vets, they've signed dudes, they've had 2 years in a row they had the offensive line with the most holding penalties in the NFL, right? That tells you all you need to know. But yeah, the Seattle Seahawks going through a period of change, and it looks like they have cashed out on Russell Wilson. They've gotten their new starting tight end because Noah Fant is better than any tight end that they have on the roster right now. I can tell you that right now. Drew Lock, hopefully just going to be a backup quarterback. But there's also the hope that comes with the 2 first-round picks, which are back-to-back years. So the Seahawks did not have a first-round pick before this trade, and they are now picking 9th in the first round of the draft because they traded away this year's first-round draft pick for Jamal Adams, which a lot of people could consider to be a good idea, especially if they can figure out how to use Jamal Adams and make him the pass rusher that he was before instead of Blitz Boy. You know what I mean? Blitz Boy is an insult. There's always that thin line between Blitz Boy, who's just like constantly running and never actually generating pressure, never actually getting to the quarterback, and then a guy who plays safety and has the ability to get to the quarterback anytime he needs to, right? The other aspect of this is now the second-round picks. In the second round, because the Seahawks get to keep their second-round pick, they have back-to-back second-round picks in the NFL draft. So that's huge. That's huge for the Seattle Seahawks. If you've ever experienced that feeling of euphoria when you are the first pick in a snake draft in a fantasy football league, where you know, like, oh, man, I'm going to get the pick. I don't have to worry about somebody picking a player that I want. I guarantee myself that my second pick is going to be the player that I want. I don't have to worry about somebody trading up because I control the ability to own that draft pick. And I think that has to, if it happens to me in fantasy football, it happens to everybody else in fantasy football, it has to be on like a supremely high level for like anybody who's actually drafting players in the NFL. So that's going to be huge. I think that's more valuable than just having like 2 picks anywhere within the second round pick of the NFL. What are you going to do? Moving on. The other aspect of this is it seems like the media is trying to pressure the Seahawks into drafting Malik Willis. If you're not familiar with Malik Willis, he's a quarterback out of Liberty University. I'm not going to get into my rant about Liberty University. You can literally just look up anything that's ever happened on that campus. I don't know how Malik Willis survived there. It may be an indicator of something about Malik Willis as a person, but we'll find out. But yeah, a lot of people are thinking that first round pick at 9 is worth using on the developmental quarterback in Malik Willis, which, what a time to be alive. The valuing of black quarterbacks at an all-time high, not only in the NFL, but like, I guess at all levels. Amazing. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens. That would be cool if he, that would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. Moving on, the last trade, the funniest one, let's be for real. The Washington Commanders traded for Carson Wentz on purpose, willingly, without a gun to their head. The Colts will receive the Commanders' third-round picks in 2022 and 2023. Sources told Adam Schefter the 2023 third-rounder can become a second-rounder tell me if you've heard this one before, if Carson Wentz plays 70% of the Washington football team snaps. So if you're not familiar, this is a clause that was in the Carson Wentz trade when he went from the Eagles to the Colts, and the Colts had multiple opportunities to sit Carson Wentz, and they chose not to. Like, there were some games where they had absolute blowouts, and they could have put Sam Ehlinger in to find out if Sam Ehlinger was going to be, like, legit or anything like that, because there were some times where he showed some flashes that a lot of people are now starting to magically remember now that Carson Wentz is gone from the Colts to the Washington Commanders. But nonetheless, 70%. You'd be surprised. The team also swapped second-round picks in 2022, so that'll be interesting. The Colts move up from 42 to, they move up 5 spots from 47 to 42, which could make a big difference, especially if they've got their eye on some of these really high-level developmental quarterbacks. And the Commanders are getting a 2022 7th-round pick. I'm sure they're going to do something magical with that. Washington also got fleeced in terms of who pays what. They'll be paying the full $28 million due to Carson Wentz for this upcoming season, which includes a $5 million roster bonus that kicks in next week for the start of the new league year. Rumor has it that the Commanders also offered 3 first-round picks for Russell Wilson, but the Seahawks used their big brains and they said, Russell Wilson's still pretty good. We're going to send him somewhere where he can't hurt us too much. So they sent him to the AFC. And not only that, one of the toughest conferences in the AFC, which, by the way, Russell Wilson, you want to talk about a man born in blood, right? He goes from the NFC West to the AFC West. And if there was another division that magically became the toughest division in football, the NFC West was hands down the toughest division in football, in my opinion, without question. And then the AFC West is now that again. We love it. We really do. Everybody's having a good time, right? We're all having a great time. Anyway, other stuff going on. The new league year starts May 16th, like I said, next Wednesday. So pay attention to your favorite team cutting some of your most valuable and favorite players that are near and dear to your heart, like Bobby Wagner, who is now a free agent. And I actually almost shit my pants before the show started because there were rumors that the Cowboys were trying to holler at Bobby for a second. And then, luckily for me, the Cowboys are too broke to actually afford Bobby. Shout out to Bobby Wagner. Know your worth, young man. Know your worth, King. Also, Bobby, I don't know if Bobby's negotiating his own contract again because he did negotiate his contract with the Seattle Seahawks. If you didn't hear the story, apparently there was like an ultimatum deal where like it was take it or leave it. The offer they gave was too weak, and they probably did one of those things where they're like, we offered Bobby Wagner a contract to stay, but it's like you offered him $1.6 million for a year, right? And Bobby's proven that he's one of the top 5, if not the number 1 linebacker in the NFL at any given point at the inside linebacker position, or just linebacker in general. Anyway, new league year starts next Wednesday, so look out for things like this. The Raiders have saved $30 million in cap space by cutting Corey Littleton, who is a guy that they signed at linebacker from the Rams, and it turns out that they actually ended up benching him for a rookie, which is clutch for the Raiders, I guess. But also restructuring Colton Miller, who's their left tackle's contract, and Kenyon Drake, who a lot of you are familiar with because he was a running back for the Alabama Crimson Tide and for the Miami Dolphins. Kenyon Drake played for the Dolphins, right? All those Alabama running backs play for the Dolphins at some point, right? Titans cut Roger Saffold, one of their best offensive linemen, saving $10.4 million. Roger, I think, was also one of the guys who missed like half the season because of an injury or whatever, if you remember that part. Early on in the season, the Titans' offensive line got bodied by multiple teams, including the Seattle Seahawks, who have like some of the worst pass rushing in the NFL. Some of the worst pass rushing, but this year they were mediocre, basically. The third highest paid edge rusher, Trey Flowers, has been told that he's going to get cut before the new year. He's been told that he's going to get cut after May 16th, and he's like the third highest paid edge rusher in the NFL, so that's going to save the Lions a shit ton of money. I would also like to take this moment, since we're done talking about the NFL, if you got anything you need to say, put it in the chat. Any hot takes or anything like that, please put it in the chat. And if you don't put it in the chat right now, hit me up on Twitter, FB_playbook. Tell me what you thought about some of the stuff we talked about. We move on, and before I get to the NBA, I just like to point out something that really just made my heart so happy. Something that, quite frankly, is unmatched in terms of joy that it gave me. This past weekend, during a UFC card, a man by the name of Greg Hardy fought. If you don't know, Greg Hardy has proven himself to be a danger to multiple people on multiple occasions in multiple domestic violence situations. He got knocked the fuck out on Saturday, and I really appreciated that. Shout out. I dislike Dana White a lot. If there's one thing that I love about Dana White, he keeps signing up Greg Hardy to get his ass beat, and I respect that. from the bottom of my heart. I really do. Moving on, NBA stuff to talk about is streaks and peaks, which is how we talk about the NBA on this here podcast. We talk about the longest win streaks, and we talk about some cool stuff that's been happening throughout the course of the NBA. I don't try and get deep into like the analysis of like where players are going or draft or trade rumors and all that kind of stuff like that. I try and talk about the treetops and give my perspective on the stuff that I've been watching, because honestly, if I talked about every NBA game that I watched every single week, we'd be here for like another hour. NBA streaks and peaks. There are around 15 games left in the regular season for most NBA teams, right? They're all on different paces and stuff like that. But yeah, here are the streaks. The Milwaukee Bucks have won 6 straight games. The Minnesota Timberwolves also have won 6 straight. Pay attention, the Minnesota Timberwolves playoff team this year, and they might not have to play a play-in game. Yeah, they're out here cooking. The Boston Celtics have won 4 straight. They are the only team other than the Bucks and the Timberwolves that have a longer win streak. Losing streaks. We talk about streaks and peaks. All the streaks. Losing streaks. The Portland Trailblazers have currently the longest losing streak in the NBA. Luckily, due to a really weird situation that happened, this is no longer the Houston Rockets. The Oklahoma City Thunder have 4 straight losses. If you know, you know. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I mean, they didn't build an army with the number of takes that they have had this past couple of this past decade, since Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and Chris Paul and James Harden and Serge Ibaka and who else? Oh, Reggie Jackson all left. They have done nothing but build up an arsenal of picks, and I'm still waiting to see how long it takes until Sam Presti just doesn't have any more cachet left. Everybody continues to call him a genius for what he's doing, but like, still waiting on the winning season. He had that one playoff year with Chris Paul, and Chris Paul was like, I'm out. I'm sorry, 2 years, my bad. He had that year with Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, where we all thought that was going to work out with Russell Westbrook. It did not. And now we move on with our lives, I guess. The culture continues, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the peaks so far in the NBA season. The culture continues. The Miami Heat are the number 1 team in the East with some huge wins this last week and a half. So they beat the 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Chicago Bulls. Oh, and they lost to the Bucks by 1 point. This is the part of the show where I point out the Milwaukee Bucks still just chilling out. Just kind of there. And when I say kind of there, I mean like still looking like they should be the number 1 team in terms of like who you think is going to win the championship, but nobody talks about it. Yeah. Nobody's talking about it. Anyway, then the Miami Heat lost by 11 points to the Suns, who are, I mean, this game that they lost by 11 points is Devin Booker's first game back. And by the way, they lost Devin Booker and Chris Paul, and it has not really affected the Suns' ability to win the game. And we'll talk about why at the end of the show here. The Bucks haven't had a losing streak longer than 2 games this entire season. Just putting that out there. Oh, by the way, Giannis attempted to murder the Atlanta Hawks. He had a 43-point triple-double. So, yeah. Nobody talks about it. Huge game in the East last night, which was Thursday, because today is March 11th. The Nets' first meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers since the trade between Ben Simmons and James Harden went down. The Philly fans booed Ben Simmons, who was on the bench for the Brooklyn Nets, and then reminded us why they truly are some of the worst fans in all of sports. They booed their own team because they lost by 29 points. So, yeah, shout out to the Philly fans. Except, they all suck except Britt Lifts and Jess Allen, who are the only 2 Philly fans that I follow on Twitter. The Bulls have been on the struggle bus. The Chicago Bulls at one point were the number 1 team in the East for a long, long period of time. 6 of their last 10 games have been against playoff teams. And then those playoff teams that they played against have been like in the top 3 seeds of both conferences. They have beaten 1 of those potential playoff teams, which is the only team that was outside of the top 3 in both conferences. And that was the Atlanta Hawks, which has not proven to be extremely tough so far this season. Moving on to, this is the part where we talk about the Lakers, because they're the Lakers. LeBron James dropped 52 points over the weekend, just in case you forgot that he still got it like that, baby. But don't worry, the Lakers still got it like that. They lost to the Rockets, the worst team maybe in all of basketball this year, which hurts to say out loud, but I did it. Okay. Right? Okay. The Suns have 15 games remaining, and they've already clinched a playoff spot. So yeah, that's how bad them losing Chris Paul for months and then also losing Devin Booker for a couple of weeks has affected them. They have clinched a playoff spot, and it was Devin Booker's first game back last night. Outside of the Suns, the West is actually still legit as hell. Like, it's still really tight. Like, the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies are tied for second in the West with 45 wins on the season. Honestly, I'm shocked that the Clippers are legit still in the mix. Not only to be a playoff team and be a play-in team, but to be like one of the teams that doesn't have to participate in the play-in games. They're 2 games behind the Dallas Mavericks and the Denver Nuggets, who are the 2 teams above them outside of the play-in tournament. Denver, of course, is... I don't know, man. We're getting to that point where I'm starting to think that Jamal Murray's not coming back this season and nobody said anything. Just very similar to like Kawhi Leonard. They had that report come out where they're like, Kawhi Leonard's probably not coming back. Don't know about Paul George and stuff like that, but for the most part, like, it's wild to think about how Denver is, without their star point guard and still to the point where they were like kind of contending for a top 3 spot. Same thing with Dallas. Like, Dallas got off to a really rough start, and everybody likes to talk about it. Luka plays his way into shape throughout the course of the season, which, hey, as a fat guy, I respect that. Luka obviously not fat or anything like that, but shout out to Luka for making sure that he gets in shape on company time. I respect that. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I ain't got nothing else left for you. It is time to go home. If you're not already home, good luck in the traffic. I gotta go. I'm supposed to be spending the whole weekend with my girlfriend at a lake house with her friends, and we're supposed to, I think just drink and be by a lake. So I'll be kayaking and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, don't forget to follow me on social media, on Twitter at FB_playbook, on Instagram at The Ashton Forever. You will join the collection of people, which includes multiple Olympians, because now a second Olympian from Team USA Rugby last night followed me on Instagram. I immediately slid into the DMs to try and get the interview on the podcast. She did not respond. I can't do anything about that. Hopefully she just looked at it. She was like, I'm gonna put that in the back of my mind and I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna circle back or whatever, and then we'll have her on the show. But nonetheless, follow me on Instagram at The Ashton Forever. That just so happens to be the exact same name that I use on TikTok, where I've been posting my NFL draft breakdowns. I haven't done any analysis. I literally just tell you like the name of the player, what high school he went to, what town he's from, what school he's from, what he did when he was in school, and where he's projected to be drafted, and some cool story about their life. Like I did Isaiah Spiller. If you're from the Houston area, Isaiah Spiller was one of the biggest and best high school prospects that come out in recent years. He was a 4-star when he graduated from high school. He played 3 years, instantaneously became the starter at Texas A&M University. He was all SEC team multiple years, and he is now projected to be RB1, 2, or 3, potentially be a 3rd-round pick. But check that out on TikTok at The Ashton Forever. Follow me on Twitter, FB_playbook. Also follow me on Twitter at The Ashton J. If you want to follow the podcast, follow it at Broke Boy Pod. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, wash your hands, wash your ass. If you have the ability to wash your whole body, please do it on a regular basis. If you have the ability to do so. Other than that, stay safe and hydrate.